All right, Megan, I think we're ready to go. All right, everybody, we'd like to welcome you to this session of the Center Baptist Church Economic Development Division, where we look to provide information to empower individuals to be more versed in financial aspects, as well as things dealing with healthcare, estate planning, and various other topics for the prosperity of our individuals that are in the community. And so this session today, we're going to be discussing credit as well as budgeting. And we're going to be bringing some good information to you that you can use for that purpose. But before we dig in, just want to take this opportunity to go into prayer and give God thanks for allowing us to be here on this session today. So shall we pray? Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for this day, Father. We thank you for the presenters and also the information that's going to be disseminated to your people. Father, we just ask you just to touch the speakers, allow this information to flow with understanding, Lord God, to the recipients so that it could be used for the upbuilding of the community as well as your kingdom. Lord, we know that you are always with us in all of our decisions as long as we ask and invite you in. And Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to be able to minister through information, the goodness of you and your word, Father. Lord, these blessings, we ask your holy and precious name. Amen. And so today, again, we're going to be talking about budgeting and credit. And we will start off with budgeting. And our speaker, Greg Stevenson, will be coming to present on budgeting. And I will be following him with a presentation on credit. And if you have any questions, anybody in the audience, we have mics available for you to come and ask questions. Anybody online, if you have any questions while you're watching live, we encourage you to use the chat and put your questions in the chat so that we can address those questions while we're here. But without further ado, we will go ahead and begin by welcoming Mr. Greg Stevenson to the podium.
Good morning. Before I start, I would like to just point out a few key points that will be covered during the presentation that I think is very important for you to start off with a mindset of these few points that I'm going to bring to the table before we get into the slide presentation. One of them is the most important part of personal money management is your spending must be less than your income. Your spending must be less than your income. The next point I want to make that you should be pretty familiar with once the presentation is over with is how do you accurately determine you are spending more money than you make. It's important that you know that in order to have a budget. Next is if you had to give yourself a budget management score, what would that score be? If you had to give yourself a budget management score, what would it be? And the last point I want to bring to the table is, do you understand personal finances well enough to assist a family member or someone else? First slide, please. Question also that I want you to see the difference at the beginning of the presentation versus at the end of the presentation. If you received an unexpected amount of money, what would you do with it? If you received an unexpected amount of money, what would you do with it? Look at what you see your answer to be now and look at whether or not it changes at the end of the presentation. Next, please. The three major components of a household budget is income, expenses, and net income. Income, expenses, and net income. The income is the amount of money you have coming in, whether that be from one job or two jobs. It's the same for every individual. I want to make this point. Whether you make $30,000, you make $300,000, or you make a couple of million, this process here applies to any given situation regardless of the amount of money you're making. Income is the amount of money you're bringing in, whether you have one job, two, whatever the case may be. Expenses, obviously, is anything that you spend the money that you bring in on. That includes every item. And net income is the amount of money you have once you subtract your expenses from your income. Next, please. The advantage of a budget. Before I get into the advantage of a budget, some experts are saying that they don't feel it's necessary that everyone has to have a budget. One of the reasons why this is being noted is because since we are in a day and time of automation, you can just about automate everything now as far as bill paying. So for example, if you do know how much money you have coming in, obviously, you just sit down and add it up. And you have automatic withdrawals going from your money. You basically have an automatic system versus the old manual system where people are keeping up and tracking their bills and spending some other way besides doing it in an automated process. But I still think at the end of the presentation, you will see some benefits of at least understanding from a manual perspective, and then it's easier to go automated and to make sure you're not making mistakes. It helps identify waste, and it helps in making informed decisions. And to me, this is probably the most important key statement in this whole presentation. In everything we do, we want to make informed decisions, but especially in dealing with your finances. Next, please. Financial goals, each one of us, obviously it varies on what your goals would be. As you can see on the presentation slide, savings, retirement, emergency funds. It may be for you student loans or whatever the case may be. Next slide. This slide is basically addressing how we perceive or talk about finances in general, whether it be budgeting, as long as you're dealing with money. And some interesting facts is currently, and this may not be totally up to date, that there are only 15 states in the United States that require some classes as far as to graduate that has anything to do with finance. Some of the other ways we find out and get information about finances is obviously through parents, financial advisors, books, etc., workshops. Next, please. You have to understand the difference between needs and wants in order to properly budget. I'm guilty of it probably still to this day, and I consider myself pretty good at financial planning and my behavior, but I can't tell you that I haven't been in a store and I see something that costs more than probably I should be spending at that current time, and my emotions takes place, and I take that item, even though I may be able to pay for it. It's not a need, it's a want. A large percentage of purchase has an emotional attachment to it. A need is necessary to live and function, and a want improves your quality of life. It's something that almost you have to have in order to deal with everyday life. Next, please. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the reason why I have this number is everyone obviously knows that the amount of money you make is impacted by your skill set and the amount of money you are being paid as far as a job. And from April 21 to April the 22nd, which was, I believe, was during the time of COVID, 71 million people separated from their jobs. And I think that's a pretty interesting statistic. Some of it may have been involuntarily, but the bottom line is that's a lot of people that are leaving their job. Next slide. I put this slide up here to give some examples of the major factors that are involved with eating up a budget. And car loan and home loans are major items that fall under eating up a large portion of your budget. And I put this up here as far as the interest rates, that you don't have to get all technical about what is it today or whatever it is tomorrow. But one of the things I will assure you that you do need to know is that if the interest rate is 25% and you're going to get a new car loan versus 2%, I don't need to explain the difference in the amount of money you would be paying out of your pocket because of the high interest rate. And Latron later will be getting into what drives your score that impacts what you get as far as the amount of credit or the interest rate you get first on your credit score. So I'm not going to go into that. You have emergency fund. That's something that they recommend that you have 8 to 12 months of income. And being I mentioned homes, obviously you got a 30-year loan and you got a 15-year loan, and there's advantages in you considering what's appropriate for you, and you have to know your budget in order to effectively do this. The interest rate, probably about, I'm not sure the exact time, well, you can pay as low as 2% for a home loan. Those days are not here now, and the interest rates are averaging around about 7% at this point in time. So I'm bringing this up to show you examples of what can gravely impact your budget, the difference between 2% versus 7%, or buying a car at 2% or 20%. And that's not considering credit cards, which some can be as high as 29%. So I want you to keep in mind when we're talking about a budget, if you don't factor in all these things, they can gravely impact your budget, that once you take your net income, there's no way that you have enough money to consider getting a credit card and buying goods and services for 29%. You're not going to be in the black, that's for sure. You'll be in the red as far as your overall budget is concerned. Next slide, please. This is an example of a simple budget. It's no need of making it complicated. I don't care if I use the number of $300,000 for your income, and if I use for your monthly expenses $150,000, and if I said you had a net income left of $10,000, this is giving you a simplistic example of what any budget, regardless of your profession or your income, this formula works for every budget. The monthly income in this case, to keep it simple, because I need a calculator for math, is that if you have $3,000 for total income and you add up everything that you have for a monthly expense, and it comes to $2,700, that leaves you basically with $300 to do everything else that was not covered under that monthly expense. Next slide, please. Personal goals as far as a budget, once you look at some of the basic things that's under a monthly budget, you might have something that you want to do as far as self-investing, whether that be stock, bonds, or whatever it may be. Obviously, you need to take into account emergency fund, because things happen in life that's unpredictable. That's a given. You may or may not be interested in 401k, saving bonds or CDs. And plus, all of us have to consider retirement. And you got to consider Uncle Sam, because you are going to pay taxes in this country as of right now. Next slide, please. This is an example that I hope it simplifies the process, because it reminds me back in the day when I remember my grandfather carrying around a bag of money, and when you would ask him for money, he would reach into a bag to get it out. All I did was took the numbers of a budget, and it's depicting the $3,000 for income. If it will go in that jar or box or bucket, you pay out $2,700. So if you took it from the $3,000 and put it over in the bucket of expenses of $2,700, all you would have left is $300. Now, what that small little jar represents, that I hope it makes a good point, that's exactly what we live with every day, that we have more expenses left normally than we have money, and that's why I made that example of that small jar, and it's up to us on how we manage our money to change that situation, and it can be overcome, I assure you. Next slide, please. Unexpected expenses. Medical emergencies, believe it or not, is the top 3 causes of bankruptcy in this country right now. And I can tell you, I went to the doctor and it was a simple procedure and it was $55,000. So I know for a fact that statement is true. Major car repair, layoffs, death of spouse. If you have 2 incomes, remember, coming into a household, and if those two incomes equal, let's say 200,000, and let's just split it up for math reasons, your spouse is bringing in 100,000. If you have a budget of $200,000, there's no way if your spouse and you don't have other things in place like insurance or a backup plan that you could keep the same budget with just one spouse now. And a lot of people miss this one. Home repairs and increase in services, which we are experiencing in this day and time drastically. I keep hearing people in basic conversations say, my rent just went up by $300. It just went up by $700, and it's not a year at a time. I was talking with one individual that I know, and they had told me that they got a notice that their rent was going up by $300. It actually went up, and the person was paying it. And then they got another notice within the same year, it went up another $500. Next slide, please. Cost cutting. Some of the things when you are dealing with a budget that you can take a look and make a determination if it's a want or need. I don't know about you, but a vacation is not a need. I need time, but if it's costing me money that I don't have, I may need to take a look at whether or not I need to cut that. Same thing with cable, clothing, eating out, new phone, or a new car. And I don't think it's no one in here that doesn't know that there's a critical shortage of cars, which have caused the prices to go up because they had the shortage with chips, and used cars almost cost as much as a new car because of the shortage of cars. So this is a good example of that if you don't keep up with the current conditions that are taking place, your budgeting will really get slammed. So you can't be reckless as far as the budget is concerned. Next slide, please. Self-investments. I started to actually put up boxes or a jar to depict this, but obviously explaining it will do the same thing. But what I've noticed a lot that when people talk about budgets or they consider a budget, the last thing that you normally get to as far as your personal budget is the savings for yourself, 401ks, anything that has something to do with your personal side of your goals is normally the last thing that we take care of. We normally take care of people that say, I need for you to loan me $700, I need for you to loan me $500. We do the student loans and everything for the kids. We take care of all those types of things, and then we cut ourselves short in this area. And I'm gonna get to something later on as far as the slides that I think will convince you that if you don't take a hard look at this self-investment slide, you are on a train going pretty fast for a wreck. Next slide, please. If you could change one thing about spending decisions, what would it be? I think this is an important question to ask at any time and point in your life, because all it will do is help you make a decision one step at a time. What is it that I need to do that will make my situation better? Because if you never at least identify one thing, you can't fix 5 or 6 things at one time, but you can fix one thing at a time. And I don't mind sharing with you, I'm not standing here today because I'm no expert. I'm not standing here today because I'm no professional. I'm standing here today because I came into this world with nothing. And I came from a family of 9. My mother took care of 9 kids totally by herself. You call them porta potties now. I don't know what one is. I know we had a place that you used outside and they didn't have the fancy term of a porta potty. So I'm giving you some clue of where I came from, and I'm here to tell you that after struggling with credit card debt and the mismanagement of money, one step at a time, I turned things around with the help of a lot of people and with a lot of information that I received to help me do something different as far as the budget was concerned. I can't see it, the light's blinding me. Information is vital to making sound financial decisions. I've already spoke to that before. Next slide, please. Work with me on this, because when people first started showing me slides with numbers, I'm like, man, really? You got to figure up there of 900,000 and you got 1,200,000. Let me tell you why this slide is vitally important. I had someone early on to ask me, what is your financial goals as far as retirement? You'll get asked that question when you go to a professional, when they're trying to help you with 401k. They will ask you, how much money do you think you will need after retirement? And I'm gonna tell you something right now, and I had absolutely no clue. I'm gonna be honest with you. I had no clue whatsoever. All I knew that I needed to be making enough money to pay for my wants and needs and have some left to go on vacation. What this number is representing is that if you work for 30 years and you only made $30,000 without any increases, you would have $900,000. If you worked 40 years, it would be $1,200,000. So if you got two incomes in the house, those last two numbers is 1,800,000. The second number is $4,800,000. And I'm going to get to a major point as to the reason why I put this slide up here. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, I hope you can see this. It may be a little bit hard to see, but basically what I did is took from several examples of a budget and tried to make it real simple. If I would ask the question, if everyone in here or online would say, let me put as the first two figures how much money I have coming in, and then you list every expense you have, each one of us would have something totally different. Some of us may have 3 pages, some may have 2, and some may only have a half a page. But what this slide is depicting is that if you want to get accurate information on where you stand with a budget, it does not have to be anything fancy, but you have to sit down at one point and go, here's my total income. Let me record or note every dollar that I have going out that will give you the total amount of money you're spending, whether it's annually, monthly, bi-weekly. You have to put those numbers down. And it's at that point in time in your life that you can say, now I know that I have to come up with a strategy to take away things that's killing me that I know I don't need. And I don't know whether you can see it or not, but if I'm not mistaken, it's nothing up on that slide as far as expenses that says anything about savings, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what I mean when I say that most of the time we have the basis of spending money, and a lot of it falls under the want category versus the need category. And I would tell you, if you plan on retiring, if you telling me there's no need for you to be drawing from a monthly income of retirement, then we're not on the same planet, because I'm retired and I'm telling you it's not free. It is not free. Next slide. This is the good example when I said I gave you that other number. This is a simplified version, that if you make $40,000 a year and you retire, if you only live 10 years, you would need $400,000 in an account to last you for 10 years. So that's my major point on when we cut ourselves short, when you look at your budget, and if you're honest with yourself, to include me, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. I don't care how you look at it. Next slide, please. A couple of points that I want to make in closing that I also think is very interesting. I don't know about on the people that are online and the people that are in here for the presentation, but I would say one of the biggest struggles in going through life is how many hours do you have in the day and what skill set or profession that you want to be happy in. What is the amount of money that you have to make that you honestly put your money in the correct buckets? And I wasn't a numbers guy, believe it or not. It's been like probably in the last 20 years because I actually was not that good in math, and I'm still not unless I have a calculator for certain things. So when people would throw around numbers or they would ask the question, where they go, how much money do you think you might need for retirement? Because since I've already retired now 2 times, well, this is the last time, the guy asked me, he said, how much do you think you need each month? Because I'm at the age where you have to start drawing from your 401k. And so if you don't have a $30,000 in there, do you think that conversation is that long of how much I'm gonna take from him a month? Are you serious? I just showed you that if you made 30,000, that in 10 years you need 400,000. Let me give you a better example. Some people have at least $50,000 in account. Well, if you break that down into 10 years, it ain't, that check you getting each month is not gonna be that big. And oh, by the way, the average payment for Social Security is $1,800 a month. So if you divide that by 30 days, you are coming up a little bit short, because the average apartment up in Charlotte that's 2 bedroom, if I'm not mistaken, is $1,600 to $1,700, and you come in home with $1,800. The last point I want to make, that you've heard a lot of people say all of us got the same amount of time in the day, but we come up with different results. I want you to check something out just for food for thought. I'm gonna make it simple. At first I started to do it by the year, but I said, no, let's not get complicated. Let's do it just by a week. If you multiply 7 times 24, that's 168 hours, because it's 24 hours in a day. You know that, I didn't have to say that. Let's say we just do an average that you get 8 hours of sleep for 7 days. That's 56 hours. Let's say, and I know some are working more and some are working less. Let's say you work 40 hours and you're only working 5 days. So that's 40 hours. If I subtract the sleep and the work from 168, it's 96 hours left that you have to work with. So if I divide 7 by 72, that means that gives you 10 hours a day to do anything you want, whether it's taking the kids to the baseball games, whether it's working overtime, or whatever it is that you are doing. But what I will tell you is that all of us got 168 hours, and what I'm telling you, I tried working 2 jobs. I haven't done like some people that's working 3 jobs. I had a guy working for me that we were working, I know, 12 to 13 hours a day, and he would get off in the morning from working for where I worked, and I was in charge, and go straight to another job. And I asked him, because I was barely getting enough sleep. And I asked him, I said, I'm not getting into your business, but I said, how are you getting from this job with the number of hours that we're working, and you go straight to another job and work at least another 8 hours? He says, well, I have a couple of kids, and I've just gone through a divorce. And he said, there's no way I could make it without another job. Thank you. You're going to save the questions for last, right? You can do it now. Is there any questions?
check, 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 check. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I know you mentioned, being able to save, and also, I think you probably alluded to, having money in various, types of investment, whether it be 401k, some sort of, stock, plan or whatever. But I know a lot of people, they don't, they look to try to figure out, what's the best way, right? Because, people that save money, because a lot of older folks, figure saving money is probably the best way, but it's hard to save money and make it grow, because if you put it in a bank account making 3%, and you got inflation at 7 and 8%, technically you're losing money every year. And then if you look at stock market, with the fluctuations in the stock market, over the years, I've met several people that that had what they thought was going to be, a good amount to at least get started on, but then once it came down to it, whether it be with fees from their mutual funds, from withdrawals or whatnot, they ended up with a whole lot less. So they were forced at retirement age to go back to work. So I guess I'm just looking for ideas. I know the real answer to the question is, consult a financial advisor. But do you have any thoughts on, how people should approach that? Whether saving, whether investments, combination of both, spread it out, what have you?
Thanks for the question. My short answer is you have to look seriously and accurately at your current position. And to me, I would not necessarily say it's a good idea to recommend a person go into like a stock or the 401k. Now, I'm real careful on this, but let me finish the whole statement, because you have to be careful when you're saying, don't do the 401k right now, don't do this. If you're in such debt based on your overall report card of your finances, that's why this budget piece is so important. First of all, you got to identify the state of your affairs. Then the next step would be, once you say this strategy is what I need to take in order to get out of this debt, then you look at the savings portion, because there's no need of you saving $50 and you paying 29% on $5,000. That makes no sense at all. Now, the other part to that is, because I didn't address it, and I didn't on purpose, because I didn't want to cause any confusion, because when you start saying stock, a lot of people are not familiar with what you may be talking about and understand it clear enough that what you do say in a short period of time like this, that you can explain it. But to your point about stock, I have personally invested in about 15 different stock. And what I'll say in short, the advantage of the stock piece is that if you strategically look at what you do, in lieu of them saying the stock market crashed, I lost money in the stock market, what I would tell you, that if you look at the statistics for the last 20 years, stock has outperformed everything. I didn't say one stock didn't fail. I didn't say some stock didn't fail, but I can tell you this, I made over $100,000 in the stock market. But you have to be strategic, and you have to know exactly what it is that you are doing as far as that's concerned. It's not something you jump into and just start putting money into.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I just want to reiterate something that you said. One of the things that I think a lot of people miss is working to try to get out of debt, so that in retirement, you can theoretically live off less, right? So if you have your car paid off, if you have your house close to paid off or being paid off, you actually need less income in order to be able to live, versus if, you buy new stuff. Now, if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but going back to one of the first things you said is living off less than what you make, and that should include what you are going to receive in retirement income. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons and biggest gold nuggets that you had mentioned. So I just wanted to reiterate that, so that folks know the goal for retirement is to try to get out of debt. So whether you You try to, Dave Ramsey, I know, has a method for getting out of debt where you pay down, the little things, as much as possible, and then work on the big things last. But the key is to try to get out of debt.
Correct.
Yeah.
You said that one of the purposes of a budget is controlling your income and your expenses, correct?
Correct.
When you talked about what people are saying now about, since you're doing automatic deductions from your checking account, would it not make sense to still have that budget so that you know how much is actually going out of the income you're bringing in? I mean, you can go look at your balance throughout the month, depending on when the deductions are made, but at the same time, you don't know really how much net income you're actually holding each month if you aren't having the budget. Do you agree with that statement or not?
What I meant when I was referring to that some experts are saying they do not feel it's necessary to have the budget because of the automated system, I agree with them to a certain degree, but you have had to have already graduated from that, that manual budget in detail of here's the total amount I got coming in, here is everything that I'm paying. Now that I know it and I got a strategy, I have set up the accounts to withdraw, to pay all the people I owe, and I know every month I don't have but $300 left, so no, there's no need to say you're keeping a budget, but you still have to monitor because your goals are changing monthly and yearly. If I was making $30,000 this year and I'm making 60 the next year, I don't want to find more things to buy. I want to manage that money down to a different avenue.
But wouldn't it require you still, even if you're having the automatic deductions made, and even if you have at some point reached that pinnacle of understanding the budget, would you not be still monitoring what's going on with your finances?
Yes.
Okay.
Now listen, I might have misunderstood your question initially. Yes, you always have to be looking because you're gradually, because let me back up a little bit, because one, with the limited information that I was trying to present in this short presentation, I'm leaving out big portions because I was sticking to, look, first, if you get the part right, do you know how much you make? Do you know how much you're spending? And you know how much you got left? That was the key points I wanted to cover today, but you are bringing up a good point on that. Once you work your way of the debt that Latron was talking about that you pay down, you have to do something with that money instead of going out buying more things like we are guilty of, to include me. Because sometimes we'll have a credit card bill, let's say for $2,000, $500 on another credit card, $600 on another credit card. We will pay it down, and instead of investing that money or putting it in a bucket for retirement, we go buy things that are wants and not needs, to answer your question. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg, for that great presentation on budgeting. And it's always a good thing in order to be able to start planning. I'm a big proponent, and as I've been getting older, I have not been as aggressive as I should have been, because, when I was in my 20s, I was making good money. I was traveling the world, and I guess, like we used to say, balling. And I really didn't think about retirement the way I should have. And did one thing, and I'll mention this because any young people out there, please do not do this. I had older folks that was telling me, please don't do it, but I did it anyway. But when I was in my 20s, late 20s, I cashed out my 401k and went balling, doing all this stuff. If you get a good job in a good company, please do not cash out your 401k, because you will get penalized. You will get But, you know, when you're single and, you know, somebody throws you a big check, bunch of money, you know, you have no kids, you know, you just go balling, right? So, but I didn't start getting serious until my early 30s, and I could have been in a whole different place than I am now. But you know, I'm working my way to it. What happens is, you know, if you have a place that you're trying to get to goal-wise. So I think Brother Greg had mentioned a slide that had $900,000, two people, 1.8 million, and you know, 1.2 million to 4.8 million. So if you have a goal in mind, that determines what you need to do in order to make that goal. So it determines, you know, how you might need to put away, how you might need to sacrifice, what investment vehicles, if any, whether it be 401k, mutual funds, what have you, that you need to get involved in. But that's going to determine what you're going to need to do if you want to hit that goal. I have a friend of mine, he's currently retired. He retired 2 years ago, and he didn't start saving until he was in his late 40s, something like that. And he wasn't really participating in 401k, but he decided, now he wasn't married, he had no kids, but he became very aggressive, putting away the max, investing in index funds. And, you know, eventually when he actually retired at 65, he was able to retire with well over $1 million in retirement funds. And he is currently now, you know, he was able to sell his house. He's currently now traveling the United States in an RV. So like every month he's in somewhere different, putting stuff on Facebook. But again, everybody has their own unique situation. So one of the things that I did with my kid, my oldest, he's 17, is really planting these seeds. And we should do this with our young people. So what I did, he got a job. He found a job working at Bojangles. And I noticed, because I have his account with my credit union and it's hooked to my account. So I can look on my phone and I can see, you know, what his balance is and, you know, where he's spending your money. I'm like, well, so isn't that evasion of privacy? Well, he's 17, so he's not an adult yet. So he's not doing anything crazy. He's going out with friends, buying food, whatever. But I noticed he has a checking and a savings account that I can see. So I noticed I already encouraged him to save half of his paycheck, and then whatever he has left, he can just do whatever he wants. So I noticed that he was not saving money. And I told him, I said, hey, you know, I'm not trying to dictate to you what you do with your money, but I would encourage you to save at least half of your paycheck. Well, I still noticed after about a month he wasn't doing it. So just this past week, idea came to me, and I said, this is what I want you to do. I said, this is totally voluntary. It's up to you. I said, I would encourage you to save half of your paycheck. But I said, I encourage you to save half of your paycheck, but this is what I'll do. I said, for every $50 that you put in savings and let sit for 6 months, I will match it 50%. So if you put $50 in savings and it sits there, I will match it. I'll put $25 in there. And so he texted me back and he said, you know, so let me get this straight, you know. So he was asking all the questions, you know how they try to figure it out. So how long does the money have to be in there? I said, well, the money needs to be in there. I said, I'm gonna do this every time you put money in. However, if that money is not in there for at least 6 months, then you won't get the math. I mean, you won't get the match, right? And so, and I'll know, because if that money dies, then the next time you get paid or the next time you put money in, I'll see where you're at, and you won't get that match for that pay period. And so he thought about it. He said, okay, now, and I know he's 17, so he put money in. He put $100 in, and I matched it, you know, with $50. And so, and I was surprised to see that for over a week, that money has still been in his checking account because he doesn't want to lose that match. So I said, and this is what I would encourage you to do. I said, that money after 6 months, it'll be yours to do whatever you want. I said, but this is what I want you to do. I would love for you to take half of that money and invest it into an index fund or an ETF. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's not like a individual stock for a company. That is an index fund is like the S&P 500 or NASDAQ, where you can buy a piece of the market. And if you look at the history of the markets, yeah, there may be little ups and downs here, maybe some big valleys, but the trend has always gone up. So if you put money in index or ETFs, ETF is something called electronically traded funds. So basically these are like a group of funds or group of stocks that limit your exposure. It's almost like people say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that's essentially what you're doing when you invest. So I told him, I said, take half of the money, put it in the index fund. Now, he's only 17, and I keep talking to him. I said, man, I want you to be better than me. I said, if you do this now, by the time you're 30 years old, you're going to be doing very well. And then by the time you're my age, I'm going to be coming to you for loans if I'm still around. So I would encourage, we have young people here. I would love to see them millionaires, in 20 years because, I may need to ask for $1, Not only that, but, have our people. That's the thing with us. We have not, as a people, been exposed to this. Other people, and I don't want to be too specific, but other people have been exposed at a young age to this type of activity, how to invest money to make it grow, how to purchase life insurance policies and use it as a way to get interest-free or low-interest loans, being able to do various things with the money to make it grow. A lot of people, counterparts, they're able to get a good footing because, going to school, they're not necessarily having to take out loans. They get money from their families or trust funds. Setting up trust funds for our kids. These are things that we need to do. And that might be a good session, Minister Dawn, that we should probably plan for a class on and how to do some of these things to build that generational wealth, because it's all about knowledge, getting that knowledge out so people can do it. And I think I said this before, I'm very grateful for my parents, my mom and dad, and my grandma and my granddad, because they told me the only thing that they knew to do to get ahead in life, and that was what? Well, work, but then also get an education. That was the only thing that they knew. So what did we do? We went and got our education. Now that we have our education, now we may not have the resources as our counterparts have, but we know how it's being done. So now that we have an education, what can we tell our young people? Okay, you need to do this, you should do this, you should do this, right? We can plant those seeds. And even if they don't catch it initially, hopefully they do, but even if they don't catch it, they at least have the knowledge so that they can take it to the next generation. So that's what we need to do. We need to get this knowledge and pass it on to our younger people, because it's all about the time value of money. If you're younger, you have a greater chance of having, and it's not all about money. It's about security, being able to have funds, help people, blah, blah, blah. But you have a greater chance of reaching that 7-figure income, retirement, if you use that time, right? a lot of times, there's people say, in some of our communities, based on how we came up and a lot of the oppression that we have been put through as Black people, we're coming out of that, and we still have what we call, even though we got the chains broken from our wrists and our ankles, we still have chains around our minds, right? And those chains around our minds say, instead of us really stepping back and building wealth, true wealth, right now many of us want to impress each other by buying things that we really can't afford, right? And we look good, but behind the scenes we're struggling, and I consider myself pretty smart, and I've been victim of that. I've been doing that before I got smart. So the key is let's try to change our mindset. Drive that car, keep up the maintenance until it's paid off. Don't pay that 24% interest on that vehicle. Pay your house, get your house paid down, maybe pay a little extra, so that when you get to retirement, you are able to live off a whole lot less than you did when you were working. And some people, even if let's say you do have good retirement income, one of the biggest assets that you have when you get older is your ability to work, right? Now, if you have the ability to work at the age of 65 and you just need something to do, then go work, make some money. The longer you can live without touching your retirement income, the better. Some people like to do that. My dad, he worked 46 years at DuPont in Florence, South Carolina. So when he retired, he had pension, he had 401k, he got double income for 2 years. And when he retired, I said, well, Dad, what you gonna do now? You can go for a cruise, you can go to Europe, blah, blah, blah. He said, man, I need to find a job. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I expected. However, if you have the ability to work, go ahead, work, But there are a lot of people in situations where they don't have that ability to work and they don't have the proper retirement income coming in, and they are hurting. I have a friend who runs an assisted living facility, and she tells me about people that come in who came from great careers, teachers, engineers, blah, blah, blah. But they're having to go on subsidized housing for the government with the government's help because they didn't have enough retirement income coming in. So they're having to go that route, even though they're in relatively good health for their age. They have to go in that time because they didn't have enough funds. Some folks, and I'm trying to be politically correct here, some folks are able to check into Shady Acres and spend, $5,000, $10,000 a month and live out the rest of their lives because they were able to get their retirement income to a point to where they can do that. And, unfortunately, there's, and that's what I'm saying, that you want to get the best care. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And in your later years, you want to get the best care possible, and if you can really afford it, you'd have someone coming into your house, maybe even living with you, those are the ultra wealthy, but at least being able to check into a facility where you have pretty much all your needs taken care of, you have medical, blah, blah, blah. That's what you want. Unfortunately, that's only been available to, a certain demographic. Right. So as a people, I want us to get past that mindset of, trying to impress each other. And that's not totally our fault. We're trying to get rid of 400 years plus of programming that has gotten us to this point. And, if we use civil rights 1965 as a marker, it's going to take more than, 80 years or 70 years to get past all of those 400 years of programming. So we have a long way to go, but as we do sessions like this, as we continue to present this information, we will get to that point. And I think I went on to a whole nother thing, but I think that's very important. We have to get rid of this programming that has been done to us for so long. And the best way to do that is to teach our kids, teach our young people, introduce them to new things. Like I'm introducing my 17-year-old to investing. Even last night, I took my kids out to Cheesecake Factory, and I asked them all, I said, do you know what investing is? What is investing? It's when you take money and you put it into something where maybe you buy a piece of a company, or you buy into some sort of, and I called it like a pot. That's what they call you. Put it into a pot, and that money grows over time. And so, you get the questions, well, how can you buy a company? That type of thing, And I say, like, you just think about what's your favorite company? And my little one says, oh, McDonald's. I like McDonald's. What little kid doesn't like McDonald's? I say, don't you know you can buy a piece of McDonald's so that when you go to eat at McDonald's, you're making money, And so, you plant those seeds. With my 14-year-old daughter, a lot of times, with females, a lot of that stuff gets overlooked. Even though we are, in a modern society, sometimes that information doesn't get to females as readily as it should, as compared to males. So me having a 14-year-old daughter, just like I'm hitting my son who's 17, I make sure that she knows this stuff so that she can be smart about her money and how she does things, I mean, it's going to be up to them ultimately, but it's not going to be because I didn't teach them. It's going to be because they'll make their own decisions of what they want to do with their life. And even if it's not something that they want to do, they can pass that information along to somebody else. So yeah, Brother Greg, I just want to say thank you for sharing that information, because I think this is something that we really need to get our heads wrapped around. And even with me, I got, changes in my life that's requiring me to budget and get things straight. But no matter where you are, you can at least get to a point. One of the biggest things, too, that we, I said one of the biggest assets we have is our ability to work. So I don't know, we may have to have another session on this, Minister Dawn, taking care of your body, because what's the use of having retirement, if you're going to spend it, in the bed, all day, every day, right? So if you have the ability to get up, and do things, go take a walk, eat right, and I'm big on, I've been wrestling with this for most of my life. I have been molding my diet over the last 20 years from a strict McDonald's and Mountain Dew and Snicker bar diet to a more healthier diet, right? So where I eat more, they say have more color in your food, more greens, things like that. I don't know if that's how we were meant to eat, but studies have shown if you eat more greens, then you will be healthier. Not necessarily that you're going to live longer, but you will be healthier for the years that you are here. And also your resistance to things like cancer and things like that will be greatly increased. Your resistance to that will be increased. So being able to take care of our health, watching what you eat, exercise, stretching. Stretching is very important, I'm learning, because, I take stairs sometime and my hamstring like to give out. I thought there was something wrong with me. Turns out it's because I'm not stretching. So you got to stretch. So yeah, I just wanted to share that stuff. These are things that's been on my mind, for a while, especially some of the other things as well. I know Sister Courtney and I, we've talked about some things in the past historically, but sometimes when things get on my mind, I think, it's a good platform. Might as well, if I have this platform, go ahead and put it out. So let's all encourage each other and get each other on the right track. All right, thank you very much. Oh, I guess I got a presentation to do, huh? Okay, and let me go ahead and make sure everyone knows about the guest book. We have a QR code, should be on the screen, as well as if anybody wants to do the QR code. We also have an email address, so if you want to stay connected and know what's going on, please check out CBC. This is the email address, CBC Economic Development @gmail.com. And I'll repeat this again at the end, the CBC Economic Development @gmail.com. So again, wanted to give Brother Greg Stevenson, thank you for bringing that information. And now we want to have a conversation regarding credit. And Sister Megan, so and I have this first slide up here. It says, people always say, knowledge is power. And there is power in knowledge, but only if it is acted upon. So I like to use knowledge plus action is power, because only if you take that knowledge, do something with it, is when it empowers you. And then I have another part that says knowledge empowers you. That's the key. Knowledge empowers you, meaning if you take knowledge, you do something with it, it will empower you to be able to accomplish, other things. Next slide. All right. So credit is what we're going to talk about. And I want to talk about the number 300 for a minute. You probably know where I'm going, number 300. If somebody came up to you, Sister Marche, gave you $300, would it be a good thing or a bad thing? That'd be a good thing, right? If you were, playing a game, maybe you're playing basketball, and you were just Michael Jordan, and you scored 300 points in the game, that make you feel real good, huh? Probably, no? Y'all just all balling 500, 800,000 in a basketball game? I would feel good if I made 300 points in a game, right? But that's not always a good thing. When you're talking about credit, your score, just from writing your name on the paper, you get 300 points. Remember back in the old SATs or state tests, you get 200 for just writing your name. Some people, I don't understand how they didn't even get the 200 points. They only know how to spell their name. But credit score, which is very important, is a number between 300 and 850. Depending on the scale, and it kind of could fluctuate a little bit, but generally speaking, 300 to 850 is a good credit, or is the credit scale. And that basically depicts your credit worthiness, right? So how well you pay your bills and manage your credit profile over a period of time. And the higher the score, the better a borrower looks in terms of their potential. And just hold that slide for a minute, don't change it yet. And so credit determines a lot of things in your life. It determines what kind of loans you can apply for, right? Not only that, for those that you can apply for, what interest rate you get, right? So Brother Greg was talking earlier about buying a car. I remember seeing this post on Facebook, or it might have been Instagram or whatever, where a young lady, she just bought this was this year. She just bought a 1985 Toyota Corolla, I think it was. It looked pretty bad, but she was happy because her payments were only $300 a month. Yeah, that's the reaction I was expecting for 5 years on a 1985 Toyota Corolla. I think it had like 200,000 miles on it, over 200,000 miles. And she was only paying $300 a month, and she was happy. And part of that is ignorance, not necessarily in a bad way, but, ignorance and, you don't know what you don't know in many cases because a lot of that information has been passed. She probably would have been better off taking that $300, deciding to ride the bus or carpool with somebody for, a year, and then taking that money, saving it, and buying something, and then, you driving that and moving to the next level. But some people, they don't have any other option because they have not been managing their credit. They go out, get loans, go to security finance, world finance, whatever, OneMain. They'll get these high interest loans and they can't pay them back, and they go to collections and they get civil lawsuits brought against them. That goes on your credit report. And what people don't understand is a lot of that follows you, through life. Now, you can get up to a decent score. That's why they say a decent score is anywhere from 620, 640 or above. I mean, I think in many cases you can get conventional loans at a 620 for a home. And in some cases you can get FHA with like a little as a 580, in some cases. So your credit follows you. That's why, again, preaching to the young people. Now, I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey, big fan of Dave Ramsey, and, he talks about, getting out of the credit game. However, the problem with that is our society is built so much on credit to where you can't do anything without a decent score, and it's probably going to get more important. So with our young people, I would say make sure we let them know, always take care of your credit. You don't have to subscribe to the credit game per se, because if you look at society, our commercial society, consumerism, it all wants us to get into debt, But if you are smart, instead of having 10 credit cards, you can have one that you manage smartly, right? And you do not overextend yourself, because the whole idea is to pay your bills on time and not have any negative marks. Now, sometimes, life happens, and, you'll have to deal with that. However, it's very important that we tell our young people, always take care of your credit. All right, so I want to drive that home. Your credit also affects your ability to get a job in many cases. Most cases, depending on what if you go in to work for a factory or even in the office at a factory or many office jobs, they don't care about your credit. However, if you're looking to go into any professions where you have a fiduciary responsibility to clients, they're going to check your credit, most likely, and see what kind of person. I had one guy tell me, he said, if I never even met you, but you gave me your credit report and your checking account transaction list, I know more about you than you probably know about yourself. And I said, wow, man, that's deep. An attorney told me that, yeah. So it's very important for our kids to be able to manage their credit healthily so that later on in life, they can live better life. All right, next slide. All right, so this is very important because a lot of people don't even know this, but your credit score is made up of 5 components, right? So the first and the biggest one, 35% of your credit score is made up of how well you pay your bills. So it doesn't even matter, like, so all the other things, if you don't pay your bills on time, it's going to bring your score down a lot. So one of the biggest things you can do to get a good credit score is to make sure you pay your bills on time. And if you're finding it a stretch to pay your bills on time, strictly speaking for your credit score, understand those bills that you have that affect your credit score. So let's say, for instance, you got an account at Aaron's. Everybody know where Aaron's is? Rent-A-Center or whatever. You know, you rent appliances and stuff. You got an account at Aaron's, and you got a automobile payment, right? So your Aaron's account is $300. Your automobile payment is $600. If you want to make sure your credit's straight, which payment you gonna make? The automobile, right? Because that automobile payment is most likely gonna hit your credit. The Aaron's payment, you know, they'll call you 50 million times a day, but it won't affect your credit score. So it's really understanding these things that affect your credit score so that you can get a good credit score and it not bring you down in the future. And we're going to talk about what's about to happen, what's been talked about, what's going to happen in the Biden administration. So we're keeping an eye on that. The next big piece of your credit score is the level of debt or the amount of debt you have. So, and what that specifically means is your revolving credit, right? So credit cards that you have that are revolving, that makes up 30%. The one thing that I don't like about Dave Ramsey, so he says cut up all your credit cards. Well, if that you could do that, but it's going to bring your credit score down. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, if you're totally checked out of the credit game, then that's okay. I think I mentioned this story again, before, but I'm going to mention it again. I had had counseling with a couple who told me and my wife that we went to them and we were paying them for credit counseling, or no, not credit counseling, but financial counseling, and they told us, long story short, that they had terrible credit. I'm like, terrible credit? What you mean? Oh, you got a 780, 790, you want an 850? And they said, no, she said, probably, I think our credit is probably around the 400s, you know. I said, 400? I said, well, what we doing here? Your credit is 400, you know. My credit better than yours. And so then the lady says, she said, you know, it's unfortunate because we can't even rent an apartment, you know. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm about to packing my stuff at that point, about to get out the door. And then it's the next thing that she said, which blew my mind. She said, yeah, we can't even rent an apartment. We can buy the apartment building, but we can't rent the apartment. And I said, oh, okay. So let me put my stuff back down and let me hear what you guys got to say. So basically, they didn't have any credit cards. They had millions of dollars in savings. They had a beautiful home, which was all paid for. And they just believed in saving for everything that they wanted. And they even had multiple investments on houses that they paid cash for. And so they were, you know, wealthy, basically. And if that's the case, you can decide to do what you want to do. You can decide to check out of the credit game. But for the vast majority of us, we have to, in some respects, participate in order to get to that point. You know, they didn't start there. And some people, unfortunately, they have the ability to start there, but because they weren't taught the values of Monday, they end up losing it all in their lives, their irresponsible lives. So 30% is for your revolving credit or your credit cards. So I recommend people to just have one credit card and use that credit card sparingly, but just so that you can get, and always pay your bills on time, just so you can get that 30%. Because, a credit card can come in handy. However, you should never really rely on it for like emergencies. It should be your second or third line of defense in emergency. You should have, like Brother Greg said, 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up, or at the very least, as Dave Ramsey said, at least $1,000 to cover if the washing machine breaks down. That way you don't have to dip into the pot in order to be able to fix the washing machine and make something else go late. If you think you need more, you can do 2,000 or whatever that needs to be, but 1,000 is a good round number. So that's 30%, your level of debt or your credit cards. There's a lot of people walking around with, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in credit card debt, and it's all maxed out. You don't ever want to be in that situation if you can. If you're in that situation, there are methods, there are ways to get it down, but you're just going to have to work at it and get rid of that debt. Then 15% of your credit is your age of your credit or your age of your debt. So if you have, I think many of us, some of us have student loans. I mean, I still got student loans I'm paying for. I'm not ashamed. Hopefully, I think we start paying back in October next month. So I need to get my letters together, and see if I can get some extensions. But anyway, we have student loans. Student loans is probably the biggest one for many of us. Many of us that have mortgages, I have a mortgage 20 years now. So that's one. And then your age of your credit, anything 2, 5 years or more could really help, so you can get that full 15% of your credit score, contributing to your credit score. 10% is the types of credit you have. Like, so if you have an installment loan, like an automobile or a mortgage, revolving credit, like a credit card, and various other things, those are types of credit that gives you that mix to give you that full 10%. And then another 10% are inquiries into your credit. So if you go to apply for a loan and they do a hard inquiry on you, like if you're getting a mortgage or you're trying to buy a car, they'll do an inquiry and that hits your credit report. The rule of thumb is to try not to have any more than 1 to 2 inquiries per year, no more than 2. However, if you're shopping for a car and you're shopping for a house, they give you a window, I think it's 45 days, right? So if you're shopping for a mortgage, they know that a bunch of lenders are going to be hitting your credit, running your credit. So as long as you do that within 45 days to try to find the best interest rate, as far as the score. Now, when you run your report and you look at your report, you're going to see all of those inquiries. Like, so if you hit 15 different companies, you're going to see them on your report. However, when the score is calculated, it's only going to count that as one. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're shopping for a car, when you're shopping for a house. Try to do it within that 45-day period. And as the score is calculated, it'll only be one. Again, you'll see those on your credit report, but it will only count as one. So these are things that make up your credit score. And you can see, just based on your payment history and your level of debt, meaning your credit cards, that makes up a whole 65% of your credit score. So you want to make sure that at least you're paying your bills on time and you're managing your credit cards responsibly, and that will help. If you're having trouble with your credit cards, there are agencies out there, and Sister Dawn will probably need to create some sort of resource page where we can put links and things like that people can go to. I guess we'll figure that out and get that out. But there are places you can go to help you reduce your debt. If you're in a position where you have a lot of credit card debt or you have a lot of debt in general, there are ways to get out, right? Settling your debt, although it's not great, it's a whole lot better than defaulting on your debt. So I'll repeat that. Settling your debt. And what does settle mean? Anybody know? Anybody here? Yeah, pay. Even if it's a less than the amount you owe, you pay that, and you're settling. They are settling. The creditor is settling for a lower amount, and that will show on your credit report. And again, it's not as great as paying the money that you owe, but it's better than going into default, because that's going to bring your score down even more. So it's always good to pay your debt. And one of the biggest things is, which is hard for us sometimes, is not going into debt in the first place, if you can help it. Things like getting a house, stuff like that, is a whole lot better, in my opinion, than renting, because at least you have an appreciating, I don't even like to call it an asset, because I consider assets as something that makes you money. But the fine line is that it is appreciating. So it can be kind of considered an asset. But if you're in a position where, let's say you have a good car, it's running, but you don't have a car payment, what the old folks used to say? Drive that car till the what? Till the wheels fall off. It don't care, if you're trying to impress some young lady, and I say this, but when I was in my 20s, man, I was trying to ball. But, it's now as I'm older, if she loves me, she gonna love me for me, my wife, she gonna love me for me, So that's what, but, some of the young people, I'm trying to plant these seeds in their head so that they think about what's important. All right, so all of these things make up your credit score, and that's very important. So next slide. All right, so this is just a little information about consumer credit. And consumer credit is just basically us as individuals, opposed to something like business credit. We are consumers, so our consumer credit is basically made up of our FICO score. Everybody has heard of FICO score. And basically that stands for the Fair Isaac Corporation. It was developed in 1956. And it was primarily developed for grocery store credit, right? So people come in, they buy things on credit. And I think what happened, these guys that created this method, they gathered so much information from people that bought groceries at their grocery store. It ended up growing and becoming the big credit reporting method that's used now for evaluating people's credit. And then there's also another thing called Vantage. How many people use Credit Karma? Credit Karma, anybody? Nope. Oh, use Credit Karma? Credit Karma is an app you can have on your phone. It gives you your credit. It actually uses something called the Vantage algorithm, or the Vantage method. So Vantage is different from FICO. So if somebody asks you what your FICO score is, they're asking, what is your FICO score? If someone's asking what your credit score is, sometimes people will look at their Credit Karma and they'll see something different, right? One of the prime examples, and Sister Rosalind, I know you probably come up on this. Somebody's applying for a loan for a house. They'll look at their Credit Karma and they'll say, oh, my credit's good, I'm a 640. I'm a 640. But they actually go to the lender, and the lender runs their credit, and the lender says, oh, I'm sorry, we might not be able to do anything. Your credit is a 575. And they get upset. It's like, wait, no, Credit Karma said, well, most lenders in the United States, they don't use Vantage or Credit Karma. They use FICO. FICO is the industry standard. Not only do they use FICO, but there's different FICO versions. There's FICO 4, there's FICO 5, which is used by the auto industry a lot. There's FICO 8 and FICO 9, which is used a lot by lenders for houses, for mortgages. There's the FICO 10 and the FICO 10T, which you'll probably be hearing about. FICO 10T is what they call the term, which that score is just going to be built off of the last 24 months of your credit activity, right? A lot of lenders are starting to adopt FICO 10 and FICO 10T now. So it's important to know you could have different scores on different apps. Now, there's a FICO app, so if you want to know what your FICO score is, get more to the truth, you can download the FICO app. It's an app just like Credit Karma. And I like to use that one more. Unfortunately, it's not free. You have to pay for it. But then there's other sites like Identity IQ and some of these others that can give you a real picture. Another thing to keep in mind about credit and the scoring, this is just hopefully to alleviate some confusion in the different versions. So not only do you have different credit scoring models, but like I mentioned, you could have different versions in each credit scoring model. Like FICO, you got 3, 4, 5, you got 9, 10. Then in Vantage, you got the same thing. You have Vantage 1, Vantage 2. I list Vantage 3 up here. But each lender has their own criteria that they put in when they generate your score. So they'll get your score and your history from these FICO. They'll generate based on your credit history, but then they'll put their own criteria. Bank of America may have different mortgage criteria than Wells Fargo or Lending Tree or what have you. So you have to really understand that your credit is being evaluated many, many different ways. And you have the ability to go and view your credit report. Everybody is able to pull their credit report, their full 3-bureau credit report, which is Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They can pull their credit report at least once per year for free. They got people out there that are selling credit reports, but you are able to go and pull, if you go to this website, I think it's annualcreditreport.com. You can go pull your credit report for free if you don't know, and you can look at everything that's out there on your credit. Next slide. And this is just a little graphic that kind of just shows, the breakdowns. This could be different depending on, what you're applying for. This is a little strict in many cases because some cases, you can get down to even though 649, is considered poor on this graphic, you can still qualify for a mortgage. You can still qualify for a car because some of the standards have been relaxed a little bit. But this is just something to kind of give you a general idea of where you stand depending on what your credit score is. So this one is saying 300 to 649 is poor, fair is 650 to 699, good is 700 to 749, and then excellent 750 to 850. Next slide. All right, just like I mentioned, you have Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Those are the major bureaus that are out there today. One of the things that's could be changing in the future, I think a lot of people are keeping their eyes on it, is the transfer, because these are commercial credit reporting agencies. They're for-profit commercial credit reporting agencies. Their Biden administration put forth an agenda to get rid of these commercial credit reporting agencies. Why? Because there have been a lot of corruption, there have been a lot of data breaches. You guys probably heard about Equifax data breach where millions of people's information was compromised. So there's legislation where Biden is planning to get rid of those or pull that responsibility and put it in the hands of the CFPB, or the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And that's where basically the government will take care of all of the credit reporting, and supposedly it's supposed to be more secure and blah, blah, blah. The only problem is, whereas there's all these little tips and tricks to get your credit straight. Well, when it goes to the CFPB, it's going to be less manipulative, right? So it's good that if you have challenges, if you have issues, to go ahead and get those squared away now, because nobody knows when it's going to come. But when it comes, whatever your score is at that point, it's going to go there, and you're going to have to follow the rule to the letter of the law in order to get your credit up. Whereas now there's little tricks and things that you can do to get your credit cleaned up. Next slide. And I was just talking about the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And so again, Biden administration is proposing new credit scoring system. And yeah, so a lot of times in credit, there's racial disparities in credit reporting, right? It's almost like, they've taken, demographic information and racial demographic information, and somehow that got computed into the score, which is not right. So, and also there's a lot of inaccuracies. So hopefully, they're hoping that this new bureau will help correct a lot of that, those disparities and inaccuracies. Next slide. So, bit of advice, get your reports, annualcreditreport.com, review, dispute any inaccuracies, anything with your address, if anything, your name, previous addresses, all of that stuff should be disputed if it's incorrect, because that could help, you to get a better score if there are inaccuracies. So, and also verify anything, any charges, any if you have any charge-offs that are not accurate, please verify that information so that you can have the best chance of having a good credit report. Next slide. All right, so this is a very important one too. This is one that a lot of people don't know about, but there are hidden reporting agencies that are being used by the big three, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So what they do is when they're calculating your score, they pull a lot of information from these places. LexisNexis, SageStream, Innovus, ARS, Check Systems, CoreLogic, and then MIS, which is the Medical Information Bureau. So they will tap into these sources. So LexisNexis is a big one. LexisNexis basically is a report for your entire life, I guess, since you were issued a Social Security card. So if you received a fishing license, it's going to be on your LexisNexis report. If you received a traffic ticket, when you were a teenager, it's going to be on the LexisNexis report. If you were ever in the military, it's going to be on your LexisNexis report. So anything that you've done pretty much all your life is going to be on that LexisNexis report. You ever notice, some people, if they apply for a fishing license or whatever, and you might not even told anybody, but after a few months or whatever, you start getting stuff in the mail, about fishing, or what have you. That's because it goes on this report, and companies have access to this report to get this information. SageStream is another one. Innovus is another one. ARS, Check Systems, obviously for, checks, check activity is going to Check System. CoreLogic is used for a lot property information. Zillow, Redfin, PropStream, what's some of the other ones? Caldwell Banker, all these websites that got property information. All the systems that are used by realtors for MLS, the MLS pulls all of its information on properties from CoreLogic. CoreLogic holds property information for all of the U.S. So anytime a property record is recorded with the county, it goes to CoreLogic. And so, if there's an issue, If anybody finds out, that, you know, either, your house, let's say somebody died and the property is what is it, etal, where the property is sent to the, or probate, yeah. Or the property owner died and it goes to the children, so it'll be recorded at the recorder's office as so-and-so et al., meaning to the children or something like that. Heirs of, that's what I was looking for, heirs of. So it goes to the heirs of. So somebody can look at CoreLogic data, and that's how they know that a property either is in probate or is going to probate. Medical Information Bureau, so anytime you go to a doctor, all these medical bills that end up on our credit report as charge-offs or whatnot, that's coming from the MIB system. So it's good to know these systems behind the scenes. And a lot of people don't know that many of these systems can be frozen, right? So you can actually go and freeze your LexisNexis. You just have to go to the website and put in a request. And where this could possibly come in handy is if you're disputing things on your credit report and you know that it's not correct, right? Because we're in church, right? Yeah, so if you know it's not correct, you dispute it, then, sometimes these companies, they try to take a long time. And so if they try to verify with LexisNexis and it's frozen, then they can't get back to you get back to the credit bureau in a reasonable amount of time. Then Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, they are required by law to remove it from your credit report, right? But that's for if you know that obviously you have the debt, then you could do that. But you may forget that you had that Sears card. Things happen, you forget, and so you say, hey, that's not mine. And then they dispute, but your LexisNexis is frozen, so they can't verify, so they'll have to remove it. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Next slide. So mortgage lenders, they use your credit score again to determine what type of loan you'll get, and also the interest rate. Interest rate is very important. That's why a lot of people are not buying homes now, because interest rates are, what are interest rates now? 7%, 8%, something like that. Yeah, and it's real rough right now in the housing market. That's why a lot of people, see a lot of people putting up apartments and people getting apartments and stuff. So the better your credit score is, the better your interest rate will be. One thing that I learned from a friend of mine, and I'm almost encouraged to encourage my children to go into the military, because I got a friend of mine. He said, "Man, if you got a what is it, DD-214? What is it? If you got a DD-214, man, you could get you a VA loan at 2%." I said, "What?" So a little brief story. This happened about a month ago. So a friend was telling me that. I was like, "Man, I was enlisted in the Air Force." He's like, "You was?" He said, "Man, check and see if you got a DD-214. So I got online, found it, and I was like, "Man, they ain't responded yet." They said it's going to take about 2 months, 3 months. But I got my thing back for about a month later. So it came last week. So I opened it up, and it said they found my record where I was enlisted into the Air Force. And they said, "But because you did not serve 90 consecutive days, we cannot issue a separation from the armed services." So basically what happened was, when I was in college, when I graduated, I wanted to go to the Air Force, so I enlisted in the Air Force. And I also applied for a scholarship, Air Force ROTC scholarship, to Georgia Tech. I ended up getting the scholarship, and the only way they could get me out of active service would to give me an honorable discharge. However, with that, I did not get a DD 214. So, but VA benefits are very, very good for education and also interest rates on loans, especially mortgage loans. So that's something that we probably want to, encourage our young people. I would imagine there's probably safer branches of military to go in than others, but also now, this is a pretty volatile time in the world, so kind of have to balance that, but there are good benefits that they give to military personnel, which, I kind of wish I'd taken advantage of. So next slide. And we already talked about the types. We talked about types of loans. And again, just your credit score can affect, how much you pay in interest, but how much you pay in mortgage insurance, premiums and things like that. So again, credit score is very important. Next slide. All right, so now we're at the questions and answers for this session. But just to reiterate, this was an opportunity really to get information out. So we want to just, be able to plant these seeds, have people discuss certain topics, get the conversation started. Because a lot of this information around budgeting, around planning for your later years in life, around credit, things like that has not been talked about much in our communities. And so we want to keep these conversations going so questions can be asked, present this information to our young people so they can ask and even participate while they're young and reap the rewards later on in life. So any questions regarding credit or even budgeting at this point? Yes.
I'm glad I came. Is this on?
I think so. Yeah,
I'm glad that I came. I have to share that I had parents who were not high school graduates who taught there's a difference. And when I walked in, you were saying there's a difference between want and needs. I knew better, but I'm like you. In my 20s and my 30s, I messed slap up.
Yep.
So I went back to what they taught me. I remember even using envelope method. This is the power. This is my phone bill. Raising two kids, a boy and a girl, son and a daughter. My son got it. He told me over and over again, Mom, I am so glad I was watching you. I was listening to you. And in that I was blessed, right after college, I went straight into finance, to banking. So the one thing that you taught me, I didn't realize about the hidden agendas. And I am real proud. I'm touching 800 when it comes to my credit score. Good. Only because I remember where I messed up. But thank you for the hidden agendas. I didn't know about that. I have a granddaughter who had my precious great-granddaughter, Isabella. I call her Belle. I am concerned about my granddaughter, Charisma, because she told me, Mom, Grandma, okay, I graduated from high school, but she has no skills. There's no trade there. There's not, she's worked at fast foods, grocery store. So I am concerned because compared to when I came out of high school versus now, you mentioned an apartment rate, one bedroom, $1,600, $1,700 a month. You didn't mention child care. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I'm really concerned, and I have to pray over that because this is my family we're talking about. But thank you, Minister Dawn, for having this program. And we do need to emphasize with our young people what they need to do. And education was the force I came out of. You're gonna go. You're gonna get this thing now. But I do encourage trade schools, military. I just found a cousin that I didn't even know existed. She has a daughter who went to military, got her bachelor's, got her master's. She's in nursing. She's a doctor now. And I hadn't met her yet, but to me, she's doc. But yeah, just emphasizing, go out there and get it. It's out there. Just go out there and get it.
That's good. Yep. Yeah, and that's a good point too, because especially she went to the military. She got, and that's education. You have benefits in education being in the military, and she can still get a house at 2%. So, but yeah, and you hit it. It's about about educating our young people, and even with your granddaughter, just plant those seeds, plant the seeds. They're gonna figure it out. They'll figure it out, get it. Even if they don't get it at that point, they'll be able to pass it down. Hopefully, in a long while to their kids. But that's another thing too. You talk about childcare. Even for females, a lot of times, having kids, especially if out of wedlock, it could be tough, for them to do the things that they want to do and handle life, because their primary responsibility is what? The child, right? So, yeah, and a lot of times, sometimes the knuckleheads can't get it together in order to do what they have to do. But I think the biggest thing that we can do as a community is to share and pour into each other. And I actually got a friend of mine who has a kid, and sometimes we talk about how, our kids, they don't want to listen to us, same stuff when I was coming up. I didn't want to listen to my dad, but, every time he talks now, I'm E.F. Hutton, he's E.F. Hutton. I'm trying to listen to everything he says. But we even came up with things like, hey, man, you know my son, why don't you talk to him, and I can talk to your son. And, you got to kind of get creative, figure things out, because sometimes they'll receive it better from somebody else than they'll receive from you. But that's where the community comes into place, right? So if we, as a community, educate each other, teach our kids, maybe even have a workshop or something. They do this thing called Biz Town Academy for the kids, where kids can go and they have these elementary school kids, and they set up a company. And like I remember my son, he went to that when he was in elementary school, and he was a financial controller in a company. And I asked him when he had to dress up, tie and everything, go to work for the whole day. And I said, man, how was it? He said, man, he said, I just hated everybody just come to me asking me for money, And it's kind of like the real world, where everybody needs, funding for their department and their check, but they did a great job introducing these kids to different aspects. Any more questions, credit, or budgeting? Yes, sir.
Something that both of us had hit on that I want to reiterate in the moment of, like she just mentioned, by the time you get through with the high interest rate on a credit card, regardless of your situation, because sometimes we get in a situation where we'll say we have no other choice but to accept that 29% credit card. So you got that against you, and you are not going to work your way out of that in 6 months to a year, I guarantee you, because the interest rate, based on the amount that you have left that you're dealing with to account for other emergencies, okay, that's one hit.
Yep.
Then when we say we want to buy a home and we get excited, and we'll go, just that, you gave a perfect example when you say it's $300, a lot of money, and you gave that example about the lady buying the car. So you end up buying the home because you have this want that you can't let go. Now you have that at a high interest rate. Then we have the nerve to go down and buy a car at a high interest rate. And I'm telling you, with those three things, which are the three major hitters that you have in your life, once you dig that hole, it's pretty hard to dig your way out of it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And so that's the thing too. There's a book, I think it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And the thing about it is, see, a lot of people that are wealthy, if you met them on the street, you wouldn't even know they're wealthy. You wouldn't even know that they're millionaires, 8-figure millionaires, 9-figure millionaires, because they don't flaunt it. It's only the people that are poor that flaunt it, right? And then at that time, we're still getting worse in our financial situation, when I was coming up, I like nice things. I like to, look good or whatever. But as I get older, I realize that there's more important things. And probably because I watch a lot of documentaries. I do a lot of reading on retirement. I don't consider myself an expert, but there is and I'll say it's a pandemic. Like as we are getting older, especially as the baby boomers are, going through, there's not going to be a lot of money out there for the rest of us, So it's going to be up to us. And there are not that many companies out there giving pensions anymore. I'm fortunate to be in one, but there's not that many companies that are giving pensions. So it's going to be important that we do what we can and also stay healthy, because even despite what might happen, you still may have to get out there and work or figure something out.
When you're looking at these interest rates, or any interest rate, when you are getting into debt, your first, I don't know how many years, maybe you can speak to that, you can give us an idea.
Mm-hmm.
First many years, the interest is being paid off,
Right.
rather than the principal. So could you tell me, in your experience, how many years it takes for them to start eat down that principal rather than paying off the interest?
Well, it could depend. It could be close to, half of the term or whatnot. But what I would say is, if you're really looking to get out of debt faster, you can pay down your principal. So once you make your regular monthly payment, if you have any extra that you want to pay, you can ask the lender to apply that to your principal. But in many cases, you have to explicitly say that, right? Because they'll say, oh, you just want to pay it on the next payment. No, I want to take that extra and apply it to the principal. So it could make your transition to more principal go a little bit faster, right? Because you're paying more on your principal. Yeah, you're paying a higher payment, but you're paying down your principal faster, which makes your interest go down, right? Because the interest is calculated on what you owe, right, on your principal. So I would say, make sure that if you can afford it, try to pay down your interest. But I think to your question, it's usually generally about what, half to learn? Yeah, could be half or more. Right. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, I think we are approaching the end. Sorry. Yeah, you want to repeat it?
I said generally, it's after year 20 before you start seeing the principal come down
Right.
on the loan. It just depends on how the loan is structured.
Right.
But it's best, like you said, to go ahead and try to pay a little toward the principal.
Yeah.
And earmark the payment to go toward principal on
Yeah.
your payment.
Yeah.
To ensure that you're touching that principal early.
Yes.
Because the majority of that payment goes to interest.
Yeah, you're right.
That's how they make their money. They're in the business to make money.
Yeah.
So
And-
usually it's year 20 and
Yeah.
or more.
And it could be, like, that's a great point you made, depending on how the type of loan or whatever. Because what if it's an interest-only loan? Like
Right.
before 2006, they were doing 50-year interest-only loans for the first 5 years or something like that, or adjustable rate mortgages, things like that. That would determine. But I know you were probably talking more conventional type of loans. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, the way my father did it is he had a 20-year loan, and every year he made 13 payments, and that 13th payment all went to principal. That's the way he had it set up, and he paid it off in 13 years instead of 20.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, or if you're working in a job where you get a bonus, instead of using that bonus to go to Europe, take part of it and pay it or the tax refund, take it, put it on your mortgage to pay the mortgage off. All right, so I think we are at the end of our presentation. Again, I want to just reiterate the email address. If you want to send us an email, that's cbceconomicdevelopment@gmail.com. That's CBCE, I missed that, CBCeconomicdevelopment@gmail.com. if you have any questions or any suggestions about future workshops that we can have. So we definitely thank everybody online for joining us. And the next workshop is September 30th, and we will be discussing Medicare. So Medicare is a great thing, especially talking about Medicare supplemental, having all of that benefit, extra benefit, so you can avoid huge bills when you need it as you grow older. So let's make sure we take advantage of that. September 30th at 10 a.m. is the next session, all right? I want to give a big hand to Greg Stevenson for talking about budgeting. And want to have Pastor, you want to close us out in prayer?
Come on, let's give everybody a hand. Those that are watching, we thank God for you as well, and those that came in person. Let us go ahead and pray. Father, we thank you for all of this discussion that is going forth. Lord, to continue to help us learn how to live after the benediction. What do we need to do in order to better ourselves and our families and generations to come? So, Father, we pray that you'll continue to bless the efforts and take care of everyone as we go our separate ways. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.